Walk me to the altar if you want, Minna told him in her mind as the doors opened. But understand this, I would rather burn this wedding to the ground than live one day as your obedient doll. The music swelled. Guests rose. Crystal chandelier scattered soft light over a sea of expensive suits and carefully painted smiles. At the end of the aisle, Han Du-gyeon waited in a black tuxedo that looked carved from shadow. 55 years old, head of a Korean crime empire that stretched through half the city, his eyes were calm, cold, and certain. Everyone in that hall believed the same story. A powerful man was taking a young bride as a symbol of status and strength. The tabloids called it a fairy tale. The businessmen called it a strategic alliance. No one asked the girl in white what she called it. Minna Reed called it a sentence. She was 19. The dress was heavy on her shoulders, the veil scratching her forehead. Perfume, flowers, candles, smoke, and fear mixed in the air, thick enough to taste. Her fingers clutched the bouquet so hard, her knuckles blanched. Beside her, her father walked stiff and silent, a man crushed under invisible numbers. The debt had started as a small sum, an emergency loan to keep his struggling business alive. Fees piled on fees. Interest twisted into something monstrous. Then the collectors came, polite and ruthless, explaining that money was not the only currency. Her daughter could settle what her father could not. Her mother had cried for days, then stopped suddenly, like someone who had run out of tears and breath at the same time. Minna had listened to arguments behind closed doors, 2 whispered apologies that tasted of guilt. In the end, 3 people sat at a kitchen table, staring at a contract that called her a bride, but treated her like collateral. She signed because the alternative was not just poverty, it was danger that would swallow everyone she loved. But she did not sign away her mind. As she walked that aisle, she saw more than his power. She saw the security at every door, the men with cold eyes lining the walls, the cameras held high to broadcast this performance of obedience. She saw the few faces that did not fit this polished world. A tired waitress by the back exit, a middle-aged man in a cheap suit, and near the very last row, a young lawyer holding his phone loosely. In one hand, Jisoo had met him at the courthouse when she went to notarize some of the marriage documents. He had looked at her too long, not in desire, but in concern. Later, in a quiet corridor, he had told her what no one else dared say. "This is coercion," he had said. "The law is twisted, but it still knows what freedom looks like. If you ever choose to fight, give me a sign. I will be there." He had slipped her his card and walked away before the building swallowed them both again. Minna reached the altar. The music faded. The hall settled into expectant stillness. Du-jeon looked her over with the calm of a man inspecting a new property, his hand curled around hers, firm and possessive. She felt the weight of every eye on her. She felt her pulse drum in her throat. The officiant began to speak, voice smooth and practiced. Rehearsed words about love and union floating over a union built entirely on fear. When it came time for Du-gyeon to answer, he did not hesitate. His agreement fell from his lips like a verdict. There was no joy in it, only habit. The officiant turned to her. "And do you, Minna Reed?" This was the moment she had lived and died in 1,000 times in her head. The moment she had almost talked herself out of, late at night, when terror wrapped around her like a blanket. The moment she had prepared for anyway, because some truths, once seen, refused to go back to sleep. She drew in a breath that tasted of roses and panic, and then she stepped half a pace away from him. Every camera angle shifted. Every breath in the room caught. Her voice cut the silence. "I am not your debt. I am not your trophy. I am not your property." The hall did not explode into sound. It imploded into a heavy silence that pressed against her skin. The officiant froze. The orchestra stared. Her father closed his eyes, bracing for impact. Du-jeon turned his head slowly, studying her like she had just grown a second face. Behind his eyes, she saw anger coil like smoke. Yet he did not raise his voice. Men like him used quiet the way others used knives. "Think carefully, Minna," he said, low enough that the microphones barely picked it up. She did not need to think. She had done nothing else for weeks. She lifted her bouquet. Her fingers found the hidden fold in the ribbon and loosened it. A small paper slipped to the floor at the back of the aisle. Jisoo saw it. He rose from his chair. One person standing in a storm can look insignificant, but the first person to stand is never alone. For Long. A few seconds later, the waitress by the exit straightened her spine and stepped away from the wall. The man in the cheap suit swallowed hard and joined them. The officiant stammered, unsure which power to obey, the billionaire crime boss, or the young woman defying him on camera. Jisu's voice rang out from the back, clear and steady. This ceremony is under duress. The bride is not freely consenting. Evidence of coercion has already been sent to the authorities and media. If harm comes to her or her family after today, this recording goes public worldwide. Phones lifted higher. Red dots blinked on cameras streaming to 1,000 hungry screens. Suddenly the hall was not a private cage. It was a stage. Dugan's fingers tightened on her hand. She felt bruises blooming under her skin. "You think this protects you?" he murmured. "You have no idea what you are playing with." She met his gaze, fear blazing but not leading. "You are not the only one who knows how to play with risk," she replied. Then she turned, not toward him, but toward the crowd. "My father's debt was turned into a noose around my neck," she said, forcing every word past the shaking in her chest. "I was told my life belonged to the man who could pay the most, and that I should be grateful for the chance to sacrifice myself." She scanned the faces in front of her, letting them see the anger, the hurt, the absolute refusal. "If I walk through with this wedding, what do I teach everyone watching? That fear is stronger than dignity. That power has the right to own whoever it wants. I refuse to teach that lesson. Not to the girls in this room, not to the boys, not to myself." For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the tide turned, quietly at first. Someone clapped once, then stopped, afraid. Another joined. A low murmur of support began to rise, held back by caution, but alive. The illusion of absolute control had cracked, and once a crack appears, more always follow. Jisu walked forward slowly, phone still raised. He kept enough distance not to provoke the guards, but his presence alone was a message. They were not dealing with one frightened girl anymore, but with the eyes of the world and the thin, dangerous edge of law. The officiant cleared his throat, and, with a courage he did not know he had, closed his book. "This ceremony is paused," he said. Paused was a gentle word. Minna knew it. Dugyan knew it. Dugyan knew it. The cameras knew it, but it was the only word that would get past his lips in that room without shattering his life. She did the shattering instead. "I am walking away," she said to her parents, to the guests, to anyone watching a stream in a dark room somewhere. "Not because I am ungrateful for being alive, but because being alive is not the same as being owned." Her mother sobbed openly, not with shame, but with something raw and brighter. Her father stood, shoulders trembling, then bowed his head to her in a gesture of respect he had never imagined giving his own daughter in public. Dujan let go of her hand at last, fingers uncoiling like a predator forced to release its prey. He adjusted his cufflinks, smoothed his expression, and smiled a thin, practiced smile for the cameras. "This event is over," he announced to the room, voice smooth enough to skate on. "Enjoy the food." His gaze slid back to Minna. "This story between us is not finished." She held his stare and answered with a line that would play again and again on every clip shared that night. "It finishes the moment. I choose my future over your fear." Then she turned and walked down the aisle alone. Each step felt like dragging, chains and cut in them at the same time. People moved aside, not for the boss this time, but for the girl who had just turned his spectacle into her stand. Outside, the air hit her face like cold water. She realized she was shaking only when Jisoo reached her and asked if she could stand. She could. There would be fallout, legal fights, threats whispered in dark corners, nights of second-guessing and fear. But she would face them not as a silent sacrifice, but as a person who had chosen herself in front of the world. A thought settled into her chest, heavy and bright. Real power is not the man who forces a crowd to clap for him. Real power is the courage to say no when the whole room expects you to say yes. If this story moved you, share where you are watching from and what courage means to you. And subscribe for more stories about people who refuse to let fear write their ending.